Happy Friday, and welcome to another edition of A Successful Transition from Monogamy to Open. And we're continuing with our series on the barriers to success, the ingrained sexual beliefs that we get from so many areas in our life. And today we're going to talk about a topic that we don't talk about much. And over the last probably couple of decades, I've definitely noticed that there tends to be there's started to be this war on men's sexuality. Now, as any woman knows, there's always pretty much been a war on women's sexuality, at least as far back as any of us could remember, and for many centuries in recorded history. But recently, there started to be men have started to become more targets. And now that men are becoming more of a target, there has been this creation of this sex and porn addiction belief system and this theory that sex and pornography can become addictive. And unfortunately, this belief system has really been adopted as like real science, despite the fact that there's no scientific background to back it up. It's moralistic ideology masquerading as legitimate. And even within the therapy world, it has become believed to be this legitimate thing, at least within the general therapy world. Now, for those of us who have more advanced education in sexuality, that is no longer really the case within the more advanced worlds. The American Association of Sexuality Educators, Counselors, and Therapists a couple of years ago came out with a statement condemning the whole sex and porn addiction movement. Now, this doesn't mean that sex can't be problematic, but the problem is the sex addiction movement really thinks of it as like any sexual behavior that isn't part of a monogamous heterosexual marriage or that's being done for this higher purpose is considered problematic. So masturbation, sex for fun, sex for recreation, sex because you're bored, sex because you're anxious, that's all considered problematic, a slippery slope if you get into that. And even looking at porn is because maybe you just like to look at porn, or maybe you need that visual stimulation to get sexually aroused. That's going to be considered problematic in the whole sex addiction movement. It's very different. Sex is more like food. So if we realize that food can become out of control, but food is not something that you detox from. It's not like heroin or alcohol or cocaine. Those kinds of substances, you can go into detox and detox your body from them. You don't detox your body from food. You don't detox your body from sex. And so this idea of the treatment being like drugs or alcohol is really an inappropriate way of dealing with the issue. Of course, sex, like food, can become problematic. We all know that with food, people can become bulimic or compulsive eating, out of control eating, or are out of control withholding of food. We know that's possible, but we don't treat that by telling them that for 30 days, okay, you're going to abstain from food, and then slowly we're going to reintroduce it to you. But you only get to do it in certain situations and in certain ways, and it's probably not good to eat alone. But that's how we treat sexual compulsive problems. It's like you can't masturbate, you can't look at porn, you can't have sex toys. You can only have sex with your married, heterosexual, monogamous partner. And if you want to do any of those other weird things like swinging or multiple partners, then you must have a sexual addiction problem. No. And part of the reason I bring this up is because for people who start to go into open relationships, and when the people in your life find out about it, you may get accused of being a sex addict. So it's very important you understand what this is and what it isn't, and why this whole fraudulent theory of sex addiction is a bunch of crap. Now, if you don't, I am not the expert on sex addiction or this whole fraudulent issue of sex addiction. So if you're curious about it, I would recommend a couple of books. One by Dr. David Ley called The Myth of Sex Addiction. And he actually used to work in that field and started to see how problematic their approaches were. And he wrote a book about, what he saw and what he came to believe and what he realized, how that was not a good approach. And the other one is by Dr. Marty Klein called America's War on Sex. It's a fabulous book. I will tell you, it's a little scary to read because you start reading it and you start seeing all throughout our culture the various ways that our culture tries to tamp down everyone's sexuality and make everyone fit into this nice, neat little box that isn't realistic. So that's all for today. I hope you all have a fabulous weekend. Next week, we're going to finish up this series. We're going to talk about the war on women's sexuality, specifically talking about the whole good girl, bad girl dichotomy. And then we're going to finish up with kind of a ways of talking about how to think about these ingrained beliefs and how to start thinking about your new way of thinking. And I'm going to share a story from much earlier in my life that's a different area, but very much applies to when you have to suddenly take out these beliefs that you have stuck in the back of your head and never looked at, and you finally have to take them out and go, oh, what do I do with this now? So we're going to do that to finish up next week. So have a great time. Don't forget to check the private Facebook group, A Successful Transition from Monogamy to Open. And I will see you next week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.